An investigation into a botched raid that killed Breonna Taylor in March of 2020 has uncovered a mountain of inappropriate, racist, and illegal actions by police officers and law enforcement in Louisville, Kentucky. Attorney General Merrick Garland spoke about the Department of Justice's findings at a press conference on Wednesday afternoon.
The department has concluded that there is reasonable cause to believe that Louisville Metro and LMPD engaged in a pattern or practice of conduct that violates the First and Fourth Amendments of the Constitution. There is also reasonable cause to believe that they engage in conduct that violates Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Safe Streets Act, and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Specifically, the report finds that LMPD uses excessive force, including unjustified neck restraints and the unreasonable use of police dogs and tasers, conducts searches based on invalid warrants, unlawfully executes warrants without knocking and announcing, unlawfully stops, searches, detains, and arrests people, unlawfully discriminates against Black people in enforcement activities, violates the rights of people engaged in protected speech critical of policing, and, along with Louisville Metro, discriminates against people with behavioral health disabilities when responding to them in crisis. The Justice Department has also identified deficiencies in LMPD's response to and investigation of domestic violence and sexual assault. As the report states, most Metro employees and LMPD officers are dedicated public servants who work hard to promote public safety. But Louisville Metro and LMPD have failed to ensure that all employees uphold the constitutional and statutory rights of the people of Louisville. Louisville Metro and LMPD have also failed to provide police officers and other employees with the support and resources that they need to do their jobs effectively and lawfully. Our investigation uncovered deficient training, substandard facilities and equipment, inadequate support for officer mental health and wellness.
Now, Garland said the investigation uncovered videos of officers harassing people with disabilities, using racial slurs, and throwing drinks at civilians. Now, as this report was being released, we were also expecting more audio and video of the police beating of Tyre Nichols to be released. You remember that case in Memphis. But a new court order put a stop to that. The court ordered no video, audio, or records related to the city's administrative investigation may be released until further order by the judge. The Department of Justice announced it will review the Memphis Police Department in the wake of Nichols' death in late January. All right, still with me, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor David Breonna and prosecutor and Commonwealth attorney Anton Bell. David, I'll start with you. You know, this is getting to be a little bit of a broken record. I suspect when they look into Memphis, they're going to find the same thing. We found that in St. Louis. We're talking about Louisville here. What happened to Breonna Taylor was just a travesty, one of the largest settlements and well-deserved in that case. Your thoughts on this report by the Department of Justice?
I agree. I agree with everything you just said. I mean, we go over this over and over and over again. And I'd imagine, too, if the Justice Department would look into other departments, we'd see similar patterns. And literally, I don't blame the police officers all that much, too. I think it's a system and a pattern of abuse. And we're going to see the same coming out of Memphis, I have no doubt, with the Scorpion team that dealt with gang members and had to use their aggression on the streets. And I think that culture is almost equivalent to what we just heard from Merrick Garland at that department.
Yeah, and the right word you used there was culture, right? Because at the end of the day, Anton, this has to be about culture. You know, when we think about things like what was going on, they were calling people monkeys, animals, boy. It just harkens me back to the Rodney King case where, you know, they were saying things like gorillas in the mist, et cetera, et cetera. This is all about dehumanizing the people that you're policing. And it creates a culture that it's okay to do these types of things. And I don't care what color the police officer is, right? Because we saw in the Tyre Nichols case, it's not about black or white, it's about blue. It's that they believe they can go out and do these types of things, and they have been getting away with them.
So you have to ask yourself the question, Michael, who establishes culture in an organization?
Exactly.
It's the leadership. And so when the leadership has established a culture that says there's no accountability for bad behavior, there's no accountability for racist behavior, and clearly there's no accountability for criminal behavior, then you have to look at the leadership. And that's why you see in many of these cases, when it begins to get exposed, the chief of police is many times removed from that post. But the leadership established the culture, the attitude, the atmosphere concerning what goes on and what's going to be allowed in their organization. And I'll go a step further as well. I think the prosecutor, the head prosecutor, also helps to establish what type of culture is going to be allowed in their jurisdiction. Because when they know there's a prosecutor who is going to try you if you are found to have done some things that is criminal in nature, they are going to have you arrested or indict you or convene a special grand jury to indict you if criminal charges is warranted in your behavior. When they know that, they'll think twice. They'll think, they'll take second thoughts about whether I should do this or whether this is going to end well for me. And so, again, culture is established by the leadership.
Yeah, no question about it. I'm so glad you said that. Thank you for that. Because people talk about, well, it's some conspiracy, the prosecutor's sitting in a room with this person or that person. No, but if each person is of the same mind, suddenly you have a systemic problem. And I think you outlined it very, very well. Why this systemic problem? People looking the other way, people in leadership. They're not telling people to go out and do these things, but when they do them, they're not punishing them. So basically, you're telling them they can go out and do it. It's time for reform. I spoke to Antonio Romanucci. He's one of the attorneys who works with Ben Crump. He's representing the family of Tyre Nichols. You may know him as well from representing the George Floyd family as well. He also said now is the time. And this was before this report came out from the Department of Justice. He sees it. He was out in Memphis for this situation with Tyre Nichols. He says now is the time for reform. Take a listen.
When you look at the context of recent history, right? The George Floyd, murder, and then the surrounding legislative push around George Floyd and its failure. And now, within what I believe a very short period of time since that occurrence, we have an event, another civil rights event in history that is just as magnanimous as George's. Now, this has to be the impetus for change. If we don't create some long-lasting change out of what we've seen in such a short period of time, then we will fail as a country. We know that policing in some respects is broken, and it's our job to fix it.
There it is. David Breonna, you were a former prosecutor. Can you speak to some of those pressures? I mean, as best you can. As a prosecutor, when you're faced, because a lot of people may not understand that symbiotic relationship between law enforcement and prosecutors. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Look, I was a prosecutor, and my law partner was a head prosecutor that was nominated by the governor, and he was all about community efforts and getting out to the community, getting out with the leaders, getting out with the residents to develop the rapport, trust, and relationships. And that is what comes first. That's what has to happen. They have to be trusted. As attorneys, we're above the police, and we hold the police responsible through our IA units and the criminal prosecutions that prosecutors have. We have the authority. So as my law partner, Bob Bianchi, was the best of the best, and literally hands-on, down on the streets, in the gymnasiums, in the groups with the leaders, and that's what has to happen to get the trust back.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's, again, about that leadership, getting down, rolling up the sleeves, connecting with the community. I can tell you the other thing that came out of this thing, they were citing people for broken taillights and wide turns liberally, but they weren't solving any serious crimes. That's exactly why there's no trust between the two. And like you said, getting into the community, changing those things, it's what's going to make a difference.